Well, we back, YBs. Happy Earth Day to the Queen Mother Earth and all of his inhabitants, all her inhabitants. Yeah. Thank you for co-signing that. I'm Angie Hambrick. I'm the Associate Vice President of Diversity, Justice, and Sustainability and the Interim Director for the Center for Gender Equity.
I am Jen Smith. I'm the Dean of Inclusive Excellence at PLU, and I teach in the Gender, Sexuality, and Race program here as well.
And today we have added another D to our diversity deep dive with our dudette, Adela Ramos. Adela, introduce yourself. Who are you?
I will. Thank you, Angie. Thank you, Jen. I am Adela Ramos. I am a teacher of English literature. So I teach for the English department. And I'm a tutor of social studies who apparently today can't put a sentence together. But those are the two things I do. I'm an associate professor of English. I am chair of the environmental studies, and I coordinate the digital humanities lab.
That's what's up. You got more titles than me. See, somebody should come up, be a guest on our show and want to.
About time, yeah.
Yeah, it's all about accumulation.
That's so capitalist. No.
So we're so excited to have Adela here on as a part of our conversation. This week we're going to be focusing on and giving a shout out to Mother Earth and talking about what does it really mean to think about the earth, what does care for the earth mean, bringing it back to the mission statement, which is what Jen and I kind of talked about last week, and what does, in a PLU context, this diversity, justice, sustainability thing really actually mean, and how do we connect those three concepts together for it to make sense? But I'm wondering, Jennifer, what you've been doing this past week?
Oh, what have I been doing? Well, I've been cleaning up my office. I am lucky enough to have a home office at my house, and it's also our guest bedroom. And I rearranged it. I cleaned up my desk. I found some weird stuff on my desk, and I threw out materials from 2006 that I still had, and papers that I had from when I was an undergraduate. And I thought, enough. This is ridiculous. What I'm holding on to this stuff for? It is rat food. And I just started tossing. So I'm cleansing. Yeah.
Some sage.
That's what I've been doing.
You need to burn some sage and make sure.
I do need to burn some sage. Yeah. And actually, we have some sage in the house to burn. Yep.
In the windows when you burn it, so the bad energy can go out. Adela, what you been doing this week?
I've been connecting with people from my past. So I guess this is a theme. But I shouldn't say people from my past, just people who I usually don't make time to talk to. I've been trying to connect. So I called this morning. I had a great conversation with my grad school advisor, who I hadn't talked to in a couple years. I've been calling my uncle, who's in a assisted living facility. So he's isolated, super isolated. And I've been calling my mom every day. She's not a person from my past. She's a person from my present. And and friends from grad school, friends from Mexico, just trying to connect all the parts and see how everybody's doing. So that's been really good. It also make me wonder why I don't do it on a regular basis, because we're so busy.
Right.
So that's been important to think about as well, what we make time for. What seems important and urgent versus those things we just leave for moments like this. So,
yeah. What you been doing?
Girl, I have been checking the IRS website like every 3 hours because all I want is my refund from this last year's tax cycle. I have not gotten it yet. I filed at the end of February, early March, and I had to mail it in for some reasons. And I have not got my refund back. And that's all I want. Stanko needs a new pair of shoes. Mama needs some food in the house. Mama needs a case of beer, like in there. Yeah. But, it's mine and I want it. And so there's this thing on the IRS website with that says kind of like track your refund. Mm-hmm. So I know that it has been received, but it has not been processed. And it has like that little progress bar, and that damn bar is just staying in that one spot. It hasn't moved in 4 weeks, and I'm done.
Yeah.
But I'm impressed that you filed your taxes already. Like I have not even. No.
As soon as I can, I do it because this is mine. So I need it. I need it back.
Well, they might run out of money. I mean, ooh. So yeah.
Yeah. So probably after we're done talking, I'm probably gonna go on that damn website again and check that progress bar has moved any, because this is real life. This is what it is.
Like halfway there, 3/4.
No, it's cut into thirds. So it's like received, processed, like in the mail. So I'm still received.
Oh,
Right?
you don't do direct deposit?
Yeah. So that's even worse.
Yeah, just
Yeah. Who knows what they're doing?
I don't know what they're doing, but you know
Maybe
what?
they're putting somebody's name on your direct deposit slip.
Well, they might be. They trying to figure out how to do that since I don't have no paper check.
Right. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. So care for the earth.
Direct deposit is care for the earth. It reduces waste. So yes.
It was a conscious decision to do that direct deposit. It was. So like I mentioned last week, Jen and I talked a little bit about the mission statement. Don't make me repeat it. I could do it, but I don't want to mess up. But at the end of it, it's care, and it's care for others, our communities, and the earth. And we talked about how care has to be much more thoughtful, that we need to move beyond kind of being nice and hospitable to people and to things and to earth, and how we truly need to care, and what does care look like. So I'm going to start off with you, Adela. What is care? What is care for the earth and her inhabitants?
Okay, so I really like your use of the word hospitable, because you would.
I had to think about it because it gets kind of caught up in my throat sometimes. I spit it out. It absolutely is what she said.
Sorry, had to do it. Okay.
I'm always impressed.
Thank you.
So the reason why I think that's an important word to think about care, but also about our relationship to the earth, is partly because I tend to think about the question of who's hosting who, and who's welcoming who, or who's a home, and who takes care of whom. And I think we tend to think of ourselves as owners of the earth, or as the hosts, in terms of how we behave. And just like side note, like the word host is really closely related to the word master, historically and culturally. And so it's I think it's organic to think about the behaviors of the host and the master when we're thinking about our relationship to the earth. And environmentalists would say that we're the guests, right? And that Mother Earth is hosting us during, as long as we're on this planet. But ultimately our behavior suggests the opposite. And so I think when we're thinking about care and being more hospitable, we might also do good to just think about kind of reconsidering or realigning how we think of our own role in relation to the earth. And if we were to think about ourselves as guests and not masters and not hosts, that in itself I think would go a long way. I mean, we'd have to think in more concrete terms about what that means. But certainly it would change just for starters, it might help us change the way in which we think about land and property, and think less in terms of ownership and more in terms of maybe ourselves as tenants, like we're just temporary guests who have to take care of this land, of other creatures, of each other while we're here, and then we go, right? Which is also, I think, signaling the fact that we're not immortal, which partly I think goes with behaviors that I'm thinking a lot about who gets to feel immune in this environment given what we're going through. And it's also kind of who gets to feel like their permanence is what matters. So those are a few things that a few, I guess, starters for your question.
Yeah, it makes me think about kind of, for me, why, and especially in diversity and inclusion work, why creating a welcoming community has never been enough for me, because I always think of like a welcome mat. And we talk a lot about setting out welcome mats. And for me, when you set out a welcome mat and have someone in your home, it's temporary, right? Like they're coming, they might, care for your space, not out of obligation, but just out of other reasons, but they don't feel a sense of interconnectedness with it because they're going to leave. Mm-hmm. And so how can we think about, going beyond the welcoming, going beyond the true care, and to, especially with the earth, to think about how I am connected to the earth and its inhabitants. And so I need to think about how I enter into the space or live much more deeply and differently beyond kind of the welcome mat kind of metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it makes me, both of you have been saying has made me think about dependency. And so the idea of being a guest in a house, you're dependent on your host or that space to be comfortable and to feel welcome, and thinking about it. And at the same time, the host is dependent on you in that space to make their work, I guess, possible. And so thinking about that, we're dependent on each other, both socially, and then also dependent on our environment and the earth in terms of it holding us, is something that sort of I've been thinking a lot about. I mentioned last week that I was reading, along with Adela, the Judith Butler book, The Force of Nonviolence. She uses this phrase that I've just kind of been kicking around a lot about intolerable dependency. And what does it mean to think about we are absolutely dependent upon each other and our environment and the earth for our very existence. And if we held that as a given, what would that look like in terms of our diversity, justice, sustainability work? And it's something that I struggle to also kind of hold on to as well. But that idea, I think it links to the idea of hospitality and interconnectedness that you each were talking about in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think listening to both of you and thinking about what Angie said about how you welcome, and then how you make sure that welcome remains, and what it means, what kind of structure that requires. And then what you're saying, Jen, about dependency makes me think about the structures that make hospitality possible, or that make those interdependencies, that sustain those interdependencies. And I think one thing it highlights is how interdependence is, and I'm thinking about Butler, and then Butler kind of reminds me of Donna Haraway as well, and how, dependencies and interdependence aren't pure relationships, and I think our relationship to the planet, to the environment, to other creatures, are relationships that are complex, and they're beautiful in many ways, but they also involve killing. They also involve invasion in some senses. I mean, certainly for us, as we settle into our respective neighborhoods and wherever we live, we do tend to encroach upon the environment of other creatures. But also, if we're thinking not just about the other, or the environment or the animal as the other, but really thinking about each other as all part of this world, for lack of a better word. What does it mean to acknowledge, I guess, what does a hospitality that acknowledges both the difficult, the ugly parts of interdependency, and the beautiful and the productive, and the parts that allow us to flourish, and kind of, I think what Haraway asks us is to hold both in the same place at the same time, and not to want to just look to look to the future, but holding both in one hand. And I think that speaks to Angie's point about what's difficult about the welcoming mat, because it's so easy to to put it out there. But what happens when, you know, you bring the people in and live with them, which is kind of what we're doing all the time in terms of how we relate to each other, but how we relate to other animals and nature, rocks, everything, right? So yeah, kind of what does it mean to make the parts where we're not as caring, or the parts where we can choose to ignore when we're not being caring enough, at the same time that we're moving toward a more caring, fulfilling a more caring project, or living a more caring, completely caring life.
When you all think of the term, the word sustainability, what comes to mind for you? What are the pieces of that definition that speak to you? So for me, I think about sustainable communities and sustaining people, and how can we build conditions, structures, policies that enable folks to be able to thrive, survive and thrive. And so what does sustainable equitable systems look like? Is kind of the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of sustainability. But what about for you all? What are some of those key points of sustainability or environmental justice that really speak to you, especially during this pandemic?
Mm-hmm. No, it's funny when you're speaking about sustainability, I was thinking about, this is another term that Butler is using, is the idea of safeguarding, because it's sort of future looking. And one of the things we're noting is how the environment is restoring itself, or in some ways healing itself, because humans have been forced to stop and pause. And so you see you see simultaneously this kind of restoration, as well as the impact of what humans have had on the environment. And so the reality is we are not likely to be paused in this forever. And there are people who are being harmed immensely by this current pause. But it does make me think about, if we're, in a situation where we're co-constituting each other, what does that look like in such a way that we're safeguarding our environment for future use, but we're also safeguarding the people who are in connection with and co-constituted with the environment and each other, so that they also are able to move into the future. So I don't know if that made a whole lot of sense, but I'm thinking about it, the idea of safeguarding as something that's future oriented, and that is also, as Adela was saying, is relational. And again, relations are simultaneously, I think, generative, but also they always hold the potential for harm. And how do we kind of hold those things, as Adela was saying, simultaneously? So when I think about sustainability, I think I try to think about safeguarding and the various ways that means across both, or across all beings that are alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think this moment is an important moment to think about sustainability, for sure. And I'm reminded of Carolyn Finney. Do you remember when she came to tell you? And she came back. She was at the university conference, and then she was at Earth Day. She was our Earth Day speaker that year as well. And she started her talk asking a question that has stayed with me, which is she asked, when we talk about sustainability, what are we trying to sustain? And I think it's struck me because I've always taken for granted that I think I know what I mean by sustainability, and it made me realize that I don't really mean like that. I think I was thinking of it as a commitment more than a practice that's tied into all the things that it's theoretically tied to, which is economics, environment, equality. But for me, I think it had become such an abstract thing. And I think your points, Jen, about what we're noticing is happening around us as we stop. And I was just reading this morning an article about how endangered turtles are actually coming back to the Florida shores because the plastic and just the people aren't on the beaches.
Wow.
And I mean, we haven't even stopped for that long, if you really think about it, and it's already having a really significant impact in the lives of some creatures. And so I think about inertia when I think about sustainability and how if what we're trying, I guess sustainability can become just survival if we're thinking about sustaining, just keeping ourselves well enough to move forward, right? And of course, ideally, I think in its best manifestation, it's about moving forward in our best capacity with all the things that you've both indicated, which is making sure people are economically able to thrive, making sure we're practicing our own ways of life in ways that aren't endangering everything we touch or everywhere we live, all of those important things. But I think this is a good moment to redefine what sustaining means, or what sustainability means. And I think we've been sustaining a lot of things that haven't necessarily been, I mean, the way of life we're leading right now has asked us to stop doing a lot of the things that we take for granted, right? Like, just a simple example, I'm only going to the supermarket once a week and just getting everything in one place because I don't want to expose others or myself to the virus. And I'm doing fine doing that, right? But we think of, well, just to think about what's happening with the protest this week, freedom and the ability to sustain a particular way of life as including all these choices that we should have all the time. And so I'm trying to think along those lines of what can we let go of in order to make more room for people who are the most economically vulnerable right now not to be in that situation as we move forward, right? Because the power of sustainability is that it tries to touch on everything. It tries to touch on the environment, the economy, and culture. But ordinarily it doesn't manage to do all those things because just purely because of what it means to live in a capitalist society. So maybe it's not the ideal term in terms of how, or maybe we just have to redefine it. I don't know. Those are questions that I have right now.
Woo, deep. That was a diverse, deep dive, Adela. That was awesome. Your mention of the protests is an excellent segue to our final segment, which is honorable and dishonorable mentions. So, Angie, who is your honorable mention today?
Yesterday was the 4th anniversary of the death of Prince.
Oh.
So shout out to one of the greatest musicians ever. Top 5 Prince songs. She's Always in My Hair, 17 Days, Forever in My Life, Something in the Water Doesn't Compute, and I Want to Be Your Lover.
Awesome.
Nice. Very nice.
Woo. A playlist for us, Angie, with those songs?
I could make a playlist with yes, absolutely.
Very nice.
Deep.
Yeah.
Who about you? Or Adela? Go ahead, Adela.
Honorable mention, Richard Marx.
Wait for it.
Best Twitter feed on, like, I go there to just get angry and happy at the same time. He doesn't care who's listening. He just puts it all out there, and he's a vegan too, which I will never be able to be. I'll just say, I have all the admiration for vegans. I can't do it for some important reasons that would mean I would maybe wither and die, and others just can't because I'm not strong enough. But just go to his Twitter. That's all I'll say. He's awesome.
It's pretty awesome, yeah. My honorable mention, I'm gonna give a shout out to the Pacific Northwest Spring. Yes. It's beautiful, the flowers are amazing, and it's one of these seasons that just creeps forever. It feels like it's been springtime for months now, so I'll give a shout out to the spring. Now, what'd you say, Adela?
Angie seems skeptical.
I know, I saw that face.
I mean, I walked across campus in the rain. I mean, I got spoiled this weekend. It was so beautiful. The sun was out dry. I mowed my lawn and did as well. And now it's, but it is, yes. It's what we come to love.
Channel your inner goddess, Angie. Just channel it. Yeah, it's good. All right. Dishonorable mentions. Who's on your nerves this week? Let's start with Adela.
Ooh, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, who said the stupidest thing I've ever heard yesterday. Well, maybe not ever, but it's at the top 5. That there are more important things than living, which is one of his buzz sentences to defend reopening. Speaking about what are we trying to sustain, those people want to sustain capitalism. That's all they care about. And so my question for him is whether that still applies to abortion rights.
Mhm.
That's what I would say to the lieutenant governor. So he's dishonorable.
Yeah. My dishonorable mention is super close to yours, so I'll go ahead and mention mine. Mine are, my fellow people who are protesting the right to be liberated to jobs. I am deeply trying to understand and to orient myself with compassion towards them, and they are being chewed up by a capitalist machine as well. But my goodness gracious, there are people who are dying from this virus, and I'm not entirely sure what they are protesting for. So, and they are being mobilized by a leader who is tapping into rage that is related to race and class and immigration, and is actually not about making these people's lives better. So that's my dishonorable mention.
Well, and it's hard to distinguish between who are the folks who want to get back jobs and who are folks like the one lady who said, I just want to go get my hair done, and had her sign that said, I want to go to the shop.
Yep.
And so the wanting the convenience of other people going back to work, not necessarily her. And maybe she wanted to go back to work too, but that's not what she was talking about. So
yeah, and when I worked jobs to pay my way through college, and it's not about the people working those jobs. It's jobs that just grind people down and don't recognize their humanity and their worth and their work, their sweat. So that's the job. Yep. And then somebody wanting to get their damn hair done, which I think might transition to your dishonorable mention, Angie. Who's on your list today?
Karen. Y'all know Karen? We all know Karen.
I know Karen.
Karen is just mad because we is calling Karen out. And then there's Karen, and then there's Emily. Did y'all see Emily?
I haven't seen Emily.
You haven't seen Emily? Emily tweeted something to the effect of the fact that Karen is a slur against white women, and it's based in classism and sexism because patriarchy and sexism have existed longer than slavery. So the N-word and Karen are the exact same thing, or not even the exact same thing. Actually, Karen is worse because patriarchy has existed longer than slavery. So you know what, Karen and Emily?
No, wrong.
Right. Like, I don't even know what to say to you other than you full of some,
No.
Yeah.
Wrong.
This is why we need gender, sexual, and race studies.
Yeah.
They don't even know the words that they're using. They are hearing words that they have seen on Twitter, and they are using them in ways that make no sense.
If you are offended by what I just said about Karen, you were Karen, and I don't have no time for that. So,
no.
Yeah. Go get your haircut, go get in training, be mad.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Should we welcome Karen to the welcome mat or not?
No, we don't even want to put out our welcome mat for her.
Okay.
No, we don't need that. We don't need that energy. We had to burn some sage and open the windows again.
That is true.
Doing that for us. So
yes. Thank you, Adela, for joining us, being our
Woohoo!
first guest on Triple D Cubed. I don't know. We'll be back next week unless they tell us not to. Shout out to our producer, Thomas Two Names, and Jay Smith up in Marcon for allowing us to continue to do this week after week. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Happy Earth Day.